Aloha 452 students. This is your video for week 14 where we're covering sex and relationships later in life. So when I first sat down to think through this unit, I was trying to think of media representation of sex and relationships later in life for women of color. And I realized that I couldn't think of very many movies or TV shows that portray women of color having sex and relationships later in life. And when I could think of examples, they were all really tropey. So by tropey, I mean depictions that fall prey to stereotypes about women of color and their sexuality. And so ideas of women of color being hypersexualized and animalistic in pursuing relationships and sex later in life. So, for example, I'm thinking about the movie, which many of you are probably too young to remember, How Stella Got Her Groove Back. So the example that I gave in my instructor overview is of the show on Netflix, Grace and Frankie. It depicts two upper middle class white women as their husbands ask for divorces because they've actually had a hidden affair together. They are a same-sex couple. And so the men divorce their wives and they get married, the two men. And the women sort of become friends, although at first they don't like each other. And they have this really strong friendship, which I also think is an important aspect of the show. And eventually they start dating and having sex with men. So the TV show covers a variety of topics related to sex and relationships later in life. It covers the issue of STIs. So obviously when you're in your 70s, you no longer have to worry about condoms in terms of getting pregnant, but you do have to worry about condoms as far as STIs are concerned. And so we know from medical sociology studies that there has been an increase in the rates of STIs among elderly folks who live in nursing homes because they're having sex with each other and they're doing so unprotected because they don't have to worry about getting pregnant. But this has consequently led to the spread of STIs among older people. And so the show covers that. Eventually, Grace and Frankie start their own vibrator store, online order store. And so they also are, the show covers issues related to women and pleasure later in life. The show also covers things like these women having relationships with men who are younger than them. And we know that stereotypically in the media, we're more likely to see older men having relationships with younger women than we are seeing older women having romantic relationships with younger men. So in a lot of ways, the show flips the script, right? However, we also have to be cognizant of the fact that these are white upper middle class women. And so they live in this luxurious beach house in California, and they don't have to worry about money and that sort of thing. However, if we think about women of color and their experiences being divorced and then having sex and relationships later in life, that's likely would not be the case. Because we know women, but especially women of color and poor women, are sort of quote unquote the losers in divorce. So that means that they are more likely, women and women of color are more likely to struggle financially once they have a divorce compared to men. And so I encourage you to think intersectionally about this topic and what it might mean for women of color, poor women who are having sex and romantic relationships later in life, because that's going to look different. And it's a little hard to imagine, perhaps, because we don't see these types of relationships portrayed in mainstream media. And even when we see white upper middle class women portrayed as sexual beings like we do in the TV show Grace and Frankie, it's considered radical, right? Like, this is not the status quo. This is not the norm. And so I encourage you to think about all of this stuff as you work through week 14 stuff. So you don't have a discussion board post this week because you have to submit your concept map 2 by Sunday at 11:55 p.m. In terms of the concept map, you are still going to be looking at the terms marriage and family like you did for your first concept map, but you're going to be thinking about those terms and doing a concept map that's different than your first one because you're going to be incorporating all of the ideas and concepts we've covered in this class this semester. So you want to compare and contrast how you understood marriage and family when you first started this class versus now after having covered various topics related to these terms. If you have any questions about this assignment, feel free to email me at hannahli@hawaii.edu, and I encourage seeing how your ideas of marriage and family have evolved after having taken this class. I also hope that by comparing and contrasting your thoughts about these terms now versus at the beginning of the semester will help solidify your thoughts that you're writing about in your final paper as we make the revisions that I gave you all a few weeks ago. Have a great week, guys.